The king was bouncing him up and down, and it just seemed to relax the whole moment.
He and the Queen will find something to have a giggle about.
Okay, he didn't take any clothes off, he didn't get his kit off, no one did, but he did all the right moves.
When his hands were on her arms and her hands were on his shoulders and they were just looking at each other, it was just a glorious shot, a glorious night.
Birthdays are always a time for reminiscing, and I think I'm drawn to one particular birthday that Charles had as Prince of Wales. It was his 50th, and he did a lot of public engagements over the course of a few days around November the 14th. But the one I remember was going to Sheffield, where unexpectedly and in full view of the cameras and the travelling media, of which I was one, he joined a remake, so to speak, of that wonderful scene from the Full Monty in the job centre, where Hugo Spear and the rest of the cast start doing their moves and grooves as they're waiting to sign on. And Charles was incredibly well rehearsed. He saw what was happening. Hugo Spear happened to be there at this event in Sheffield, and it was actually in the premises where this particular scene was shot for the Full Monty film. And Charles obviously knew the moves, and he knew the film, and he got into it. Okay, he didn't take any clothes off, he didn't get his kit off, no one did, but he did all the right moves, and it was a demonstration, I felt, of not only his willingness to play ball, if you like, but to send himself up in a gentle kind of way. And I think it just helps to sort of break down barriers and showed that he was, and he can be, an approachable figure, despite having this incredibly lofty position then as Prince of Wales and now as King. So I think that's the day I'll remember mostly of Charles, and something which sticks in the mind.
My favourite Charles moment is when he tried his hand at breakdancing at a disco in 1985. Then aged 37, he was on a visit to Middleton-on-Sea in West Sussex to visit young people who were looking for jobs. It was an unemployment scheme funded by the then Prince's Trust. And the video is just great because it shows his sense of humour. He's just very relaxed and shows what he's like kind of away from the pomp and ceremony of royal life. And the video went viral on TikTok last year and was very popular, and I just love that it shows that different side to him.
My favourite Charles moment is actually any moment where you see him laughing, normally with Queen Camilla, and I think that's one thing that people don't realise about the King. He laughs a lot. I've been travelled all around the world with him, from kind of New Zealand to Newcastle, and everywhere he goes, he and the Queen will find something to have a giggle about. You'll often find them looking at a comedy moment with tears pouring down their face. And I think that's one of the things that makes him a man who's so much more relaxed and comfortable in his own skin at the age of 75, because he has someone in his life that he can live and work with and just enjoy what he does. I think a good recent example of the King's sense of humour was when I was with him at the Sandringham Flower Show in July, and I spotted a pie that had been made to look like him with very large pastry ears. And the Queen came over and said, "Is there anything that's caught your eye?" And I pointed out and said, "Well, I rather like the look of this pie, Mum." And she looked at me and laughed, and far from being offended, she called her husband over to have a look at it. And he had such a chuckle about it, and they walked along through the flower show still laughing at what they'd seen. So he's someone that can really understand the humour in situations and doesn't mind being gently teased himself.
I think my favourite Charles moment was from before he was king. It was back during the Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. There was a pageant where it was a procession along the Mall. It was lots of colour, lots of fun. But it was very long, and he was seated in the royal box with all the different members of his family. And there was Prince Louis there, who was only 4, and it was obviously a long day. And he'd been very well behaved, but you could tell he was getting a bit nervous. He was a bit getting a bit bored. He'd been sitting on his mother's lap, and he obviously thought it'd be a nice thing to sit in his Grandpa Charles's lap too. So Catherine mentioned it to William, who kind of said down the line to his father, would it be okay if Prince Louis sits in your lap for a while? And of course, his grandfather said yes. So Louis trotted along, along the royal box, and then sat on his grandfather's lap and seemed to be having a whale of a time. You could see them laughing with each other. The king was bouncing him up and down, and it just seemed to relax the whole moment. And it turned what, as any parent will know, can get a bit difficult with small children. It really transformed that moment and turned it into a great bit of family fun. I'm a social diarist, and we kind of have to observe the small things that really say a lot about a person. And what we saw there was Charles, the family man, the grandpa, and now he's kind of becoming the grandfather of the nation. And I think he's taking to that just like he's taken to being a grandfather with his own family.
My particular favourite was a huge event in London. It was the No Time to Die premiere, world premiere, and 2 royal couples turned up that night, Charles and Camilla with Kate and William. The thing that stood out to me was the greeting of Charles when he saw Kate, who that night looked like a Greek goddess. She was wearing this beautiful gold Jenny Packham dress. The whole world kind of took a breath when she appeared on the stage. She walked over to Charles. His face was just so radiant, and he was smiling at her like a proud father would with a daughter. The moment when his hands were on her arms and her hands were on his shoulders and they were just looking at each other, it was just a glorious shot, a glorious night. It was clear from these photos how much he cares for her. I mean, even last week in Nairobi, he was talking about his beloved daughter-in-law. He really hit the jackpot with Kate as a daughter-in-law, as a mother to his 3 grandchildren, and to an amazing wife for his son.